Yeehaw! Let's make some ribs. Howdy y'all, it's your host Victor Salazar here with the Sazon Cooking Show, and today I'm going to show you guys how to make mezcal ribs. That's right, mezcal. But first and foremost, this isn't the right outfit. Let me get an apron on. There it is. Okay, now I feel better to make this delicious meal. So let's go ahead and get into the ingredient list. So now that you guys know what you need, how do we make it? Well, that's what I'm here to tell you. I actually made this a few nights ago and I tested two different methods because I wanted to make sure I give you guys the best flavored tender ribs you could get. So I tried two methods. One regular, just did nothing to the ribs, just let them be. And the second one, I dry brined in salt for an hour. Amongst the two, the dry brine is absolutely the best in terms of flavor. It just retained all the flavor that we put in so much effort into making, and it felt like it was just the best version of these ribs. So now I'm gonna teach you guys how to properly dry brine your ribs. So in front of me, you see a scale. Now the reason we're using a scale is because we're gonna weigh the rack of ribs. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna weigh it in grams. Once we have that, we're gonna take 1% of that weight in salt and sprinkle that on both sides. That is how you properly account for how much meat is on this. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my scale on. Set this to 0. I'm gonna go ahead and take my rack here, lay it on top. Okay, so it's looking like this weighs about 1,437 grams. So what we're gonna do is use 14 to 15 grams of salt. I'm gonna probably go 15, be a little bit more generous because it's a thicker cut, and cover both sides. So what we did is reset our scale, and now we're gonna pour in about 15 grams of salt. Perfect. Okay, so now that I have that, I'm gonna clear the scale off, move the ribs back on, and we're gonna sprinkle on both sides. Go ahead. Now, if you want to be really exact, you could actually keep this on the scale and measure half the salt on one side, half the salt on the other. Probably what I should have done, but I'm gonna guesstimate it here. Let's go ahead and flip this over. Another thing to note while I'm doing this is you can see that the membrane is actually still on. A lot of people take this off, and I find that when you cook it long enough, it's not actually an issue. So I'm gonna keep the membrane on while I'm doing this. Boom, last of our salt. So now I'm gonna go ahead and turn this back over it, and we're gonna put it in the fridge for an hour. All right, everybody, with our ribs in the fridge, next thing we're gonna do is start preparing our barbecue sauce. This is a mezcal-based barbecue sauce. I actually found this recipe from El Silencio Tequila's website, which happens to be the mezcal we're using. So first thing we wanna do is go ahead and knock out all of our dry ingredients, which there are very few of, but we're gonna combine them in this bowl, and then we'll move over to the stovetop to finish it. First thing up is cayenne, and you want about a tablespoon. Next is our chili powder, a tablespoon of that as well. It's okay if you have a little more. Lastly, Sazon black pepper, 1 tablespoon. That's it for the dry mix. Now we can head over to the stovetop and start melting butter. All right guys, so we're at the stovetop now, and the first thing we're gonna do is put 4 tablespoons of butter in there on a high heat, melt it down. Then we're gonna add 2 diced small yellow onions. All right, so that butter's looking nice and melty. So what we're gonna do is add our 2 small diced onions. Cook those for about 2 to 3 minutes. The trick is gonna be to coat all the onions in the butter and saute them a little bit. And once they're looking pretty good, we're gonna add in our garlic. That's getting there pretty good. You can start smelling them, they're fragrant. So we're gonna go ahead and add in the garlic. This is about 6 cloves of garlic, finely minced. And we'll cook this for about another 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, it's smelling, looking, and sounding like it's ready to add our wet ingredients, and I'm gonna go ahead and add those measurements here. Okay, let's get back to it. Can't forget get our dries. Last but not least, the most important part of our dish, mezcal. Love that sound. So one last thing I want to add to this is actually our mesquite liquid smoke, because sometimes when you're cooking, the alcohol will vaporize and you're not going to get a lot of the essence of it. So just to help out with some of the smokiness of the sauce, we'll use half a tablespoon liquid smoke in. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and mix it around a little bit and bring it up to a boil. Once it reaches a boil, turn down the heat just a little bit and we're gonna let it simmer for 20 to 30 minutes. This really depends on how thin or thick you want your sauce. Earlier, thinner. Later, thicker. While this is boiling off, I'm actually gonna preheat our oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit because those ribs are almost ready to come out of the fridge. With all that going on behind me, time to start our dry rub. This dry rub primarily consists of Don Sazon adobada seasoning, but it's really good with all the other stuff I've had in there. Trust me, I've had it, people have tried it. It is such a good dry rub. So what we're gonna do is start out with a half cup of Don Sazon adobada seasoning. Boom. This is gonna give us our chili, our heat, and pretty much all of our base flavors, including salt and pepper. Next up, brown sugar. Half a cup as well. Quarter cup of Don Sazon granulated garlic powder. This is some good stuff here, guys. And lastly, Don Sazon black pepper. We're gonna use an 1/8 cup of this because our adobada seasoning already has some black pepper in it, but this is gonna add that little extra perfect barbecue kick. Perfect. And now with our trusty whisk, we are going to combine. And it's gonna have this really nice red color from the adobada seasoning. Give it a taste. That is as good as the first day I ever made it. Okay, the dry rub is complete, and now the next thing we're gonna do is pull our ribs out of the fridge because they are ready to be seasoned. Look at those. See how brilliant the color red gets from all the salt? It's almost curing it. It's beautiful. Before we start seasoning these ribs with the dry rub, first we're gonna create a mixture of our mesquite liquid smoke and tomato paste. This is gonna add like a level of acidity, and it's really gonna balance out the flavors of the ribs. So let's make that. First up, liquid smoke. Gotta add a tablespoon of that. Then we're gonna go ahead and add 2 tablespoons of our tomato paste. Go ahead and combine. So part of the reason that we're making this mixture is because since we're not using a traditional smoker to make the ribs, we're cooking them in the oven, this is gonna introduce a lot of that smoky flavor that you're used to when eating a rib. Not to mention, everything is personal preference. If you actually wanna use more liquid smoke, go for it. I find that it's a little strong, so I'm kind of being gentle, pulling my punches with it. That color is beautiful from the tomato paste. So now what we're gonna do is take some of it and just slather it on both sides of the ribs. Make sure you get your edges, flip it over. Oven's done preheating. All right, as you can see, we have our ribs totally covered in this, and this, I'm telling you, is the secret to a really good balanced flavor in your ribs. Let me just clean up my hands so we can add on the dry rub. Hands are clean. Take your dry rub and we're gonna generously apply to both sides. Don't be afraid of the dry rub. I mean, this is really where we're gonna get so much flavor from these ribs. And if you want, pat it down so none of the seasoning falls off. I kind of like to do that. The other trick here is make sure you get your edges. If you see what I'm doing with my hand here, it's allowing the seasoning to fall at an angle that I couldn't normally get. Also, I'm gonna turn the heat off on the sauce because it should be done now. Okay, so let's go ahead and flip this bad boy over. Boom. Add some more dry rub. You can see all the granules from the brown sugar. I'm telling you, this will make the meat so flavorful. So I'm gonna grab an aluminum foil lined baking sheet, place the ribs on there, put them in the oven. Our oven is preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which means these ribs are gonna go in there for 1 hour and 15 minutes or until the internal temperature reads 165 to 175 degrees. Let's put them in. 1 hour, 15 minutes. Let's clean up our station. Okay guys, we are almost there. One of the last things we have to do is take an immersion blender and blend up the barbecue sauce that we made to make a really smooth liquid, and we'll keep that off to the side waiting to slather those ribs up. Let's go ahead and bring our reduction down over here. If you've never immersion blend, it's not hard. Don't let your immersion blender go for like a minute straight. Do little bursts, move it around, and try not to let it touch the bottom of the pan because you don't want to scratch it. But let's blend up some barbecue sauce. I'm glad I didn't wear white. Whew. Splattered everywhere. I might do one more hit of this, but this is our barbecue sauce. We'll put it off to the side, let it cool, and once it's ready for ribs, we'll put them on. That's the Oh my God, that's so good. Okay, I'm gonna eat it all with a spoon. I'm gonna put it back over here. Last thing we gotta do is just wait for the ribs to come out so we can wrap them in foil, put them back in. So I'll see you guys when it's time for that. Okay, 25 seconds left on the clock. These ribs are almost ready to come out. Bring them out, wrap them in aluminum foil, stick them back in at 300 degrees. I'm ready to hear that siren call, baby. Ready. They are ready. Oh, baby. Let's get these on the table. Look at those ribs. Just gonna get a little read here on the temperature. Perfect. We are at 174. That is perfectly within our mark. So now what we're gonna do is take this out, wrap it in tin foil, place it back in the oven at 300 degrees for 1 hour and 15 minutes. Let's wrap this thing up. Really want to make sure we are covering up the whole thing so it's tented in there. This is going to allow it to steam within itself and cook the rest of the way. This is just in case there's any extra drippage, but should be fine. 1 hour, 15 minutes at 300 degrees, or the internal temperature reads 195 to 205. That's it, start the clock. Okay, so a reason that it is super important that you continually check and monitor on the ribs is because I just did, and they're ready about 35 minutes early. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull them out because they're up to temperature. I don't want them to overcook, but that's a pretty fair lesson in that like I should have accounted for that in my cooking. Let's pull these out. Okay, and just to be sure. Okay, so we are at that 202 mark, which is exactly where we want to be. It means we did not overcook it. This is perfect. The reason that you want it up to 195, 205 in that range is because it turns the collagen into gelatin. That's what's gonna give you that juicy, tender bite. There's not gonna be a lot of resistance on these. That's why this is the perfect temperature to cook ribs at. So I'm gonna go ahead and uncover them. Let's see what we did. Oh yeah, you can already see how juicy that is. It smells so good. Like, I wish you were in the room smelling what I'm smelling right now. So you guys can see the efforts of hard labor. Woo-wee! That looks perfect. You can see how the bone has receded about 1.5 inch off the meat. That means it cooked. That means it's going to pull right off and be just so freaking tender. My God, this is so beautiful. Let me get a cutting board so I can cut one of these pieces off and we can try this thing. So grab yourself a pair of tongs and move it over to a cutting board. Do you guys see this? Look at the color. Look at how the sugar crusted on the top of this, even though it's wrapped in tin foil. Look how juicy it is. It's got spring in it. We gotta eat it. This is juicy. Like, see the juice? Ow, just dripped onto my arm. Let's see if I can even pull it off the bone. Woo! Like that. No remnants of meat left on this bone. Look at that. Clean. Cut off a little piece here so I can try it without absolutely burning my mouth. What a joyride. It's like kind of unreal actually, how tender that is. I gotta try it with some barbecue sauce. Now remember, this is our Mezcal barbecue sauce. I don't even have words. I have to say nothing. That is flavor uncompared. Finger looking good. Let's break it down. So the ribs, the reason they're so good. To me, there's a few factors. One is the dry rub blend that we're using. The mix of our adobada seasoning and the brown sugar is the perfect combination of sweet and spicy. Every bite you take out of the ribs, you're like, oh yeah, like I get in some like tender chili heat. It's really nice, but you get like this sweetness from the meat and all the juice that's coming out of it. Like that is phenomenal in a bite. Like, you get it. And the tomato and the liquid smoke really help lift out a lot of the flavors that I feel like you'd get from a traditional smoker. And on that note, the Mezcal barbecue sauce is so freaking good. It has a little more heat because of the cayenne and chili powder, but the Mezcal, the liquid smoke, all of it combined, reduced into this beautiful culmination of sauce. Like, this is the match made in heaven. That's it, hands down. This is worth every second of your time. I don't think I've ever been more excited to eat ribs in my entire life. I could probably kill this whole rack right now if I wanted to. That being said, I won't, because that's a lot of ribs. But I want you guys to go ahead and try to make this at home. Yes, it's laborious. Yes, it takes a little bit of time, but the results speak for themselves. And I don't just mean that because I made it and it was good. I mean, you will drool over these ribs. So go ahead and grab the ingredient list from the beginning of this video or check the description down below and head on over to www.donsazon.com where you could buy our adobada seasoning, black pepper, and granulated garlic, which is what we used in this recipe, or find yourself something else that really suits your fancy. We have so many different seasonings, so many different blends for all kinds of cooking. That is the beauty of Don't Sazon. We are versatile. We are wide ranged. We have everything you can want. So if you haven't already, guys, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment down below if you're a fan or if you love ribs. And I really do hope you guys try to make this at home. I'm not kidding when I say this is probably one of the best recipes I've ever created. Also, don't forget that applying the code SHOW at checkout when you're buying can get you 10% off your order. And that's gonna do it for me, guys. These are easily some of the best ribs I've ever had. I know I have a personal bias towards it because I made it, but really, they are phenomenal. I think you guys will think that too. And remember, this might have taken a long time, but it was really easy to make. And that's what we want to do here at Don't Sazon. We want to make cooking easy, fun, and simple. With all that wrapped up, guys, I'm gonna try not to eat this entire rack of ribs. I'm your host, Victor, and remember, a house isn't a home without Don't Sazon. I'll catch you guys in the next one.